Creating your personal finance plan. This is kind of the capstone, right? Of the four of them. All of the other ones are kind of building blocks to something that I recommend people do and create a plan. Doesn't have to be that involved, but create something, preferably in writing, that you go back to and look at once a year, or more frequently. There are some people who look at it much more frequently. So, what's a financial plan? It's a document. Doesn't have to be an incredibly long document, but it's a document that kind of looks at your future state, where you want to be, and compare that to where you are. And you use the plan to help identify strategies to get you to your goals. So it's really kind of a goal setting document, a planning document for the future self of you. It should include short, medium, and long-term personal financial goals. A short one might be, I want to get a new laptop. I want to get a new smartphone, or a medium term might be a vacation, or saving up a down payment for an automobile. Long term could be a mortgage, or saving for a child's college, or saving for retirement. It should include a spending plan and a savings plan, because it's hard to get to the goals that you're setting if you don't have a savings plan. And I would say every savings plan should have an emergency fund where you set aside in fairly liquid, easy to access accounts, savings accounts, or even CDs that you maybe pay a penalty if you withdraw early. Something that would have maybe 3 to 6 months of your needs, to live off of, right? Housing and food and transportation and utilities, things of that nature. In case there's an emergency, you get laid off, or something like COVID is a great example of why you need an emergency fund. You want a budget, right? And you want to look at the cash flow. Where's your money going? If you actually track it for a month or two, you'll be surprised that you have leaks that you don't even know exist. Things you're doing. If you really, and a lot of people will say to build a financial plan, doing that for a month or two just once in your life puts you in a different perspective. You really know where your money's going if you track every penny. And you may want to change some of where that money's going. It would have a debt management plan. It could be, when you're young, I want to pay off my student loans, or I've got credit card debt I'd like to get rid of. As you get older, it could be, I don't want to pay my mortgage off in 30 years. I'd like to do it in 25 or 20. And how could I do that possibly? It should include an investment plan. How do I set aside some money that I invest? And frankly, most of that's going to be for retirement. Um, you want a risk management plan. That's what insurance do I need? Do I have the right insurance? You want to do a net worth statement. It's going to look ugly when you're young. It looks ugly for most people under 35. It looks better as you get older. And really looking out for your future self. Once you generate positive net worth of some measure, you want to look at a legacy and estate plan, wills and trust, and how do I make sure if something happens to me, money goes to my loved ones, and doesn't go to lawyers and courts because I didn't have a will. So it's important to take time out of your life to plan. We always say we're too busy to do this. But if you have a plan in place and you go to it periodically, maybe it's once a quarter or even just once a year, and you update it, it actually, reduces stress. It helps build financial resiliency. It gives you a personal level of security that, I've got a plan, I'm on track. Studies show, that people who actually do a plan are much more likely to, if not achieve their goals, come closer to their financial goal, and have more. We look at planners and non-planners. Planners people who take the time to plan have more money set aside for retirement than non-planners. It's not really surprising. If you never take time to think about and do this, it's going to be hard maybe to, ever you get this done in your life. Um, and it gives you confidence over time in managing your money. And studies show that only about a third of adults out there really have any sort of comprehensive financial plan that they go to. And it's important because these plans change every time you have a major life event in your life. When you buy your first home, your plan looks different. Have a kid or two or three, like I have. Each time that happens, your plan looks different. Think about if you want to save for college. If you get a new job that with more pay, what do you do with the extra? If you move to a city or state with different taxes, that could impact your plan positively and negatively at the same time. If we move to New York City, there's a lot more tax. You pay the city tax and the state tax. So you may be getting a bigger job, but the cost of living's higher. So those sorts of things. Getting married will impact the plan. Hopefully, if you get married and have two incomes, maybe it allows you to save money quicker and reduce, expenses you each have. At some point, you don't claim your children as dependents anymore. I'm at a point where I'm getting close to not having many dependents. I've only got one that still I can claim, but hopefully in a couple of years that'll be gone. You could have all sorts of things: a death of a spouse, an illness, disability of you or your spouse, death of parents. All of these things that impact your plan in some way. Yeah, so there might be an inheritance, right, with the death of a parent. So you've got to go back whenever a major life event occurs and say, okay, how do I need to change my plan? So here's a great article. I think this was from 2019 that literally in CNBC, you're not alone if you spend more time planning for your vacation than working on your finances in a year. I mean, the vast majority of people will spend much more time planning for a 1 or 2 week vacation than they will for planning their finances for the rest of their life. There's this survey of where we spend time. You can see the most time we spend in any category is sleep. On average, people spend about 8.8 hours of sleep a day. Working is actually less than that. Watching TV, and this includes everyone, right, who's an adult, including retirees. So these numbers kind of get skewy. Everyone sleeps, but not everybody works. So if you're looking at that and going, that doesn't make sense to me, that's why. But look at watching TV, right? 10.84 hours a day, almost 3 hours a day, people spend watching TV. That's 7,000 times more than they spend on financial planning activities, which is about 2.5 minutes a day. So when people say I don't have time to do this, and I think we all have time to do it. I think we don't want to do it, and so I would highly recommend that maybe as a New Year's resolution, you consider saying I will allocate some time to creating a financial plan that will help get me in the right place. When you're putting plans together, particularly longer term goals, I highly recommend all of them are SMART goals. SMART goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, right? So specific is really clearly defining what you want. So it might be, I want to own a home someday, right? And to do that, I need a down payment. Measurable, you'd say, okay, how much do I need to save each month, each year? What's the period of time? Maybe it's a $40,000 down payment. So you want to measure it and keep track of that. Maybe put it in a segregated savings account so you know that money is for your mortgage. It has to be achievable. If you're young and starting out, you're not buying $1 million home, at 20% down. So you want it to be something that you if you can't achieve it, it becomes kind of almost the opposite of a powerful tool. It actually is a disincentive if it's not achievable. It's got to be kind of relevant to you and your life and your personal priorities. and time bound. It has to have a deadline. So a perfect example is save 10,000 for a home down payment in 2 years would be a SMART goal. So all of your goals should be long term. We're going to talk about some of these other goals that you might want by topic. So real quickly, this is something I do with students, whether they be teachers who I'm training to teach financial literacy. We talk about the fact that there have been like people who have made enormous sums of money who file bankruptcy generally when they retire from sports. So these are great sports athletes. The one that Antoine Walker is one that sticks in my head, right? He literally, when he filed for bankruptcy, I had to sell his world championship NBA ring on eBay. It's like I think he got like 29 or 30,000 for that. That went to the debt holders. These are people who didn't budget or plan. They were spending money as it came in, and they weren't really thinking about their future self and the fact that at some point nobody's going to pay me this money because I'm no longer a professional athlete. And what do I do when the money runs out? There are other athletes that are doing the opposite. And one of the big changes that's occurred in the sporting profession is that pretty much all of them, and this is now happening not just in the professional sports, this is happening at the collegiate level, particularly right now with students getting paid for income, that they're actually going through financial literacy planning and training and trying to get them to think about putting money aside, or understanding that if you get a deal with a local restaurant as a football player at Ohio State, you're gonna have to pay taxes on that money, and you have to do withholding and pay that money in quarterly, or you're gonna get the IRS coming after you. So when I ask, why do so many millionaires go broke, I would say, in a nutshell, they don't know how to budget. And so you need to, I think one of the first things with financial planning is putting together a budget. And there are a variety of different budget methods. I'm not going to say I recommend one over the other. I'll tell you what I've always done historically. Some people use the 50-30-20 rule. We talked about that earlier, I think in the rules of thumb presentation we did. But that's where you put 50% needs, right? So I need a house, I need to pay my utilities, I need a car, to get to work. So your needs is a big chunk of where you put your money. Your wants, which are things that you could live without, but you want to go on vacation every year. You want to go to dinner at a restaurant. And even though it's cheaper to eat at home, you want to buy yourself luxuries. Who doesn't? So you have your wants, and then you really want to focus on savings and debt repayment. And that should be about 20% of your budget. That doesn't include your mortgage, that and all your housing costs is that or rent. That would be in the 50% of needs section. Some people do zero-based budgeting, where that's literally where you go through where you've got to almost justify that it's a worthwhile endeavor for me to spend this money given the alternatives. That's a tough one, and you're really allocating dollars to very specific categories. The other, which is a Dave Ramsey system, using physical or digital envelopes to put aside money immediately from your paycheck into categories. So you can't steal from one category to pay another. A lot of people find this very helpful mentally, and it certainly works. Another is creating artificial scarcity. And that is if you set up, and David Bach has written a book on this called The Artificial Millionaire. I've said the automatic, not artificial, the automatic millionaire. But you create artificial scarcity by making sure your money goes immediately from your paycheck into that 20% of savings and debt repayment. You kind of automate things and you only spend what's left over. If you get paid biweekly, weekly, monthly, however that's done. That's what I've always done. I found if I moved my money out of my checking account into other places that I thought were important, I would try to live off of what's there. stuff happens, right? And you do need to pull money out of your savings or your emergency fund. Things happen, emergencies happen, but that's a really good way to do this. I won't go into this, but there's a bunch of apps out there. Unfortunately, some of them cost a bit of money each month. If you don't want to spend money, NerdWallet has a very simple 50, 30, 20 budget calculator on their website, but YNAB, you need a budget. That's kind of a zero-based method. Good budget and is more of the envelope budgeting system we were talking about. Pocket Guard has kind of a simplified budget snapshot. Honeydew is great, particularly if you have couples living together and sharing expenses. It's a way to budget with partners, particularly when you have like individual checking accounts, things of that nature. Empower is a Empower personal dashboard kind of tracks wealth and spending as well. There's a whole bunch of them. You'd be shocked if you go on your Apple phone or your Google phone and search in the apps department, how many applications exist for budgeting methods. But creating a budget, once you create goals, creating a budget is definitely a way to help you achieve that goals. And sometimes before you create a budget, I would highly recommend maybe tracking your expenses at an incredibly granular fashion for 30 to 60 to 90 days to see where are you spending money on. And that'll give you an idea of how to kind of create these either envelopes or categories and subcategories. But people who budget are more likely to achieve their goals. Now, well, I should say achieve their goals, come closer to achieving their goals than people who don't budget. Net worth, right? That's something you probably want to look at every year. When you're young, you're probably in negative net worth. Don't worry about that, right? If you get student loans, an automobile loan, maybe you saved up and now you've got a mortgage payment, and you're fairly new in the house, you can have pretty high negative numbers that tends to switch to a positive number as you get older. Particularly, housing tends to be one of your biggest assets. And you can see that here. This is a survey of about 30,000 that the Fed does, and they were looking at median net worth, and you can see it's very low, right? It was in 2019 only 16,000 for people less than 35, and it went up to 39,000 in 2022. Pretty big increase, and a lot of these increases are probably related to two things. One is the stock market, and the other, which is probably the much bigger component of this, is the net worth in housing. So if people owned a house during this period of time, housing across the country during the post-COVID era, as we all know, kind of popped up, probably to an unsustainably high cost right now. It's actually going down again nationally, and unfortunately, housing prices historically can jump up quicker than it takes to come down. So don't give up hope if you're. I do believe there will be like there have been in multiple times in my life. There will be another time when housing is much more affordable than it is now, but it can be very discouraging for people right now. So look at your net worth. Median is half or above, half or below. Mean is, as you can see, skewed higher by wealthy people. Averages are always higher than medians when you look at this kind of data. Here's an example I think we went through before of what you need to do. It's real simple. You can do it on a piece of paper. You look at all your liabilities. What debt do I owe? Do I have a mortgage? Do I have credit card debt, student loan debt, an automobile loan? And those are my liabilities that I have. Could be even a lease is a liability, right? Where you have no value, but you have a bill that you have to pay and you can't really walk away from. If it's a 3-year auto lease, for example. And then you look at your assets and what's the current value of your house? What do you have in your 401k plan or 403b or IRAs, or what have you set aside? Do you have other savings or investments? The automobile, what's its current resale value? Hopefully you could resell it for more than you owe. and you just tally those up, and here is somebody, with an assumed net worth of 200,000. So it's just a simple example for you to do. Risk management is really important. Um, you can see it with flooding. There are people who um, lived in flood zones, right, and didn't have or had flooding that happened in the last few heavy rain cycles we had here in Vermont. There were two big floods in the last probably 12 months, right? And if they didn't have flood insurance on their home, their homeowner's policy doesn't cover flood. So it's really important to understand your insurance coverage and what you need and what are the risks you have in your life. So when you think about risk, right, we've talked about this one repeatedly. You could have a COVID event or maybe an unexpected loss of a job, and you want to have, or it could be maybe your furnace goes busto, and you want to have money that if I needed to get my hands on in an emergency, or I have to replace tires on my car and I need my car to get to work. Your emergency fund allows you to tap into this. So if you build that up, and a lot of people suggest that should be the first goal you have is 3 months of your ordinary expenses set aside, and if you draw from it, you got to replenish it and bring it back to where it was. But insurance, you need health insurance. Um, it's expensive, and particularly in this state. But you really want to have catastrophic health insurance at a minimum to cover you if something really bad happens. Um, Life insurance makes sense if you have people, loved ones who are counting on you. So an example would be if you have a couple and both incomes are required for them to continue to pay the mortgage on the home. And should one of you pass away, you want to make sure the house stay that the person surviving can stay in the house. You need life insurance. When you have kids, boy, that you really need to sit down and think through what you need for life insurance. Disability insurance, the odds are you're going to get disabled, before you die. And disabilities are fairly common. It could be a disability like maybe you have cancer and you survive it, but you're still going to be out of work for some period of time. And does your firm offer both long-term and short-term disability? Social Security gives you something in disability if you qualify for it. It takes a long time and a lot of paperwork to get it. So if you don't, some people buy their own disability insurance. You definitely want property insurance. You want to make sure you get coverage on your car. Particularly if you use it to get to work every day. You want to have the right coverage from a homeowner's perspective. Rental, umbrella liability insurance is something you might want, particularly when you have teenagers, just to make sure that everything you saved your entire life doesn't disappear because of something they do and it happens in your house. Retirement savings is certainly important. If you're an educator or a government employee and you have a pension, you've got to figure out what the economic value of that pension is and how much more you might want to put aside. College savings, if you want to help your kids, if you have kids, save for college, there's things you can do there. Another risk is, make sure your investments are diversified. If you put all your money in Bitcoin, for example, Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin has got a volatility level infinitely greater than the equity market. And I know it's hitting 100,000 right now. But if you put all your wealth in it, the Bitcoin has had many down markets, I think 5 or 6, where in a very short period of time, it's lost 50% of its value fairly quickly. Um, uh, um, you want to look at identity fraud protection. There are companies that offer insurance that you can buy. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you want to do things that are going to minimize your likelihood of someone going after you. And one way to keep an eye on whether or not somebody is doing that is to look at your credit reports. You have three major ones that then you can literally, everyone gets a right to look at their credit reports once a year. And I know some people who schedule every 4 months, I'm going to look at one of them just to see if there's something on there that looks amiss. Is somebody trying to impersonate me and taking on liabilities that I didn't know existed? And nowadays, you can also keep track of your credit score. Um, and investor fraud protection, do your research. There are so many scams right now. It's like shocking how many there are. I don't know about you. I get emails and text messages and the stuff I see. Some of it is like looks very credible, but people are trying to steal your money. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is. There's an organization that got their hands on 200 million recently that's been in the paper where they're promising people guaranteed 10 or 15% a year returns on some sort of fixed income investment. Allegedly, it's a scam. This one couple that just retired gave almost $1 million to it. So anyway, that's something to think about. But you really want to look at risk management. Uh, Tax planning to minimize your taxes. Look, you want to max out to the extent you can uh, your retirement accounts and employee benefits that give you tax advantages. So your 401k, your 403b, your IRAs, your healthcare savings account or medical FSAs or 529 plans or dependent care FSAs. Those are all got great tax benefits that you have either on not paying income taxes on them, or if they're after tax, like a Roth 401k and IRA, you never pay taxes on that money again, including all the gains. So if the government's willing to give you ways of avoiding taxes, my recommendation to you is understand them and avoid them. There are things you can do there. One thing you should make sure, are you eligible for the earned income tax credit? If you are, take advantage of it. That's free money. You can reduce capital gains that have been created in your taxable investment account by tax loss harvesting. You can avoid taxes by taking what you want to invest in fixed incomes and putting it in municipal bonds. There's all things you should do. I'm not a tax expert, so I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I will say that particularly as your assets grow, uh, you know having a tax advisor, particularly as things get more complex, who does your taxes and can give you advice, is not a bad thing. They can oftentimes save you a lot of money. Retirement planning, it's really important you start putting away money early. We've talked about the different options. I think it's always great to maximize through an employer plan first. Studies show that if you have a deductible plan provided by your employer, you're 15 times more likely to literally save for retirement than if you work for somebody who doesn't offer a plan. So maximize that benefit, have it come out of your paycheck before it hits your checking account is probably the best thing you can do. Best advice I ever got is every time I got a raise when I was younger, the recommendation I got from an older gentleman was to take half of my raise and allocate it toward my 401k. I still got a raise. It wasn't as big as the total, but I made sure before I got used to that new cash that it was hidden. It was hidden away, and you'd be surprised if you do that how quickly you can really generate some wealth in your 401k or 403b or IRA or wherever you're putting it. And you need a retirement savings goal, and you need to look at where you are and monitor and adjust it. So I'm going to walk you through this because this is something a lot of people don't know how to do, and I think it's helpful. You should want to know, what's my number when I retire? What do I need? And so the first question for many, I'm assuming most will get Social Security benefits. And this is just for the year 2024. you can see the annual past average earnings. So your past average earnings are what's used by the Social Security system to calculate your benefit. And you can see it's an incredibly progressive system that people who make lower levels of income have a higher percentage of their income replaced with Social Security. So, for example, looking at that low one of 28,813, the benefit for that would, as of 2024 at age 65, would be almost 15.5, right? And a year. That's a 52% replacement ratio of pre-retirement income. So half of your pre-retirement income will be covered. As you know, there's a cap. I think it was 163 in 2024. I think it's going up to 168, or maybe it's going over 170. I don't know what the 2025 number is. But if you're always paid the maximum every year, of Social Security over, and it's usually like a 10-year look back, I think, to get the average. So let's say for 10 years every year, your income was over whatever the maximum was, and that adjusts every year. You could maybe get, a Social Security of 41,000 at 65. You could wait to 70, and that would go up by about 8% a year. But let's just say you take it at, 41,000. That's only going to cover 25% of your pre-retirement income. So why is that important, right? It's important because people in the financial services industry will tell you that when you retire, a good goal is maybe anywhere from 65 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. A lot of people might say 70, 75%. So if you went to a financial advisor, that's the advice you'd get probably anywhere in the country. And you can see, average income, which is the 106, that kind of medium average of what people get out of this would cover maybe the average person in Social Security. If you take everyone in Social Security, average it together, it works out to 39-40% of your pre-retirement income is covered by the Social Security benefit. So here's how to think about it. And I'm using this 106, $106,000 a year example. If that's your number, your pre-retirement income, and you wanted 75% of that covered, then your goal is about 80 grand, let's say. And on the previous page, right, you could see you'd get about 34,000 covered by Social Security, which means your retirement savings would have to make up 43% of that pre-retirement income. So almost a third from Social Security, and then 43%. So in order to save to get to that number by 65, if you wanted to be really safe and use what's called the 4% withdrawal rule, I'll talk about that in a second, you need 1.15 million. So 1,150,000. And the 4% rule is a rule of thumb, and it says you don't take more than 4% of your retirement savings a year in year one. In subsequent years, you can increase whatever that number was, that 4% number, by the inflation rate. Okay. And you might have to readjust that number if there's like a giant market crash, like in 2008. But this gives you an idea. So, I think it's you can try to figure out what your retirement goal is for maybe age 65, 68, 69, and then figure out how can I get there and how do I let compound interest, which we talked about previously, get you there. So let's talk about some risk we have when it comes to this. What is longevity risk, right? What's the risk is, you outlive your money. That's longevity risk. You live longer than your retirement savings do. And here's an example. There's an online system, and this example I did a while back, but it's a couple who were both born on January 1956, January 1st. Odds are that wouldn't happen, but just so I could, and they both turned age 65 in 2021. And you can see if you go down to the bottom, there's a 25% chance that at least one member of the couple will live to age 98 when they were, and this is based on 2021 when they retire. There's a 10% chance that one of them will live to at least 101 years. And so you've got to remember there's a risk that when you retire, you have 30 to 35 years of retirement. And do you have the right amount of money saved? So longevity risk is something a lot of people don't think about, but you do want to think about that. And that would drive a lot of people, if they're healthy, to say, gee, I don't want to take Social Security till I'm 70, so I get the maximum amount I can out of those benefits. There's market risk. And if there's a market crash, like I was saying, you might not be able to use that 4% rule that we were talking about. A great example of that, and this is because of what's called the sequence of investment returns risk. And imagine you're a couple that retired in June of 2007, just before the market crash in 2008. That would have put a big damper on your retirement plan with a 60-40 portfolio with 60% equities and 40% fixed income and money markets. Because that 60% of your portfolio would have dropped by more than 50%. And so there is the greatest risk for a retiree is the 5 years before retirement and 5 to 10 years after retirement, because that can really derail your retirement plans, and you can't predict when there'll be a market crash. And that would require you to say, okay, I'm not going to live off of 80. I'm going to have to make do at 60, hypothetically, right? You change your spending requirements and make your budgets live within that requirement. But it's very, very dangerous. It's one of the more dangerous things that you need to think about. There are other risks that you have in retirement that just happen. And one just happened right in the past few years. We went through a period of incredibly low inflation from 2008 to sometime in 2020, mid 2021, and then we went through the highest inflation we had seen since the 70s and 80s. And so if you retired recently, that high inflation had an impact perhaps on what you're able to spend in retirement. Long-term care, what if you or a spouse needs to go into a nursing home? Generally that's for a year or more. That can be very expensive. What if you're forced to retire early? So you had a goal of maybe the 1.15 million, but now there's no way to get there because you're forced to retire early because you've been laid off and you can't get another job that pays anywhere near what was there. That happens to a lot of people in recessions. A death of a spouse can definitely change things. If you're getting 2 Social Security checks and one dies, you go to the higher Social Security of the 2 living, but when they were living, and so it's not unusual for Social Security benefits upon a death to drop by 50%, or 40% or some percentage like that. There's all sorts of things that can happen. There's annuity risk. If you have an annuity, you're literally that income is dependent upon the insurance company that issued it. They have to survive. It's called counterparty risk. They'll pay you, but if they go insolvent, you don't have an annuity. A pension risk could be a government deciding, you know what, we can't afford to pay what we said we were going to pay. Or it could be same with a company pension plan or a state government pension plan, and they reduce your payout because they have to, because of a horrible financial situation. That's a rare occurrence, but it has happened with corporations and state governments before. There are things there. But one of the biggest thing is, even though you're on Medicare, it costs money. So Fidelity, and in fairness, Fidelity wants you to save a lot of money, so they make a lot of money. So maybe these are a little goosed up, but they're saying an average single person age 65 in 2023 will need about 157,500 to cover health expenses in retirement. And for a married couple, it's 300,000. So that a big chunk of your money will go to medical expenses. And it's funny, your spending changes a lot as you get older, right? You don't buy clothes, you don't travel much the older you get, and a bigger chunk of your spending is then allocated a lot of times to, frankly, your health care, because you're older and you have more health issues. Estate planning, a couple of things I hope, I don't know, maybe for Brianna to think about in the future, but bringing an insurance person on to talk about property casualty insurance, like homeowners rental and things like that. Maybe another expert could give people advice on that. Would be great. Maybe to get a tax person on tax advice. I'm not an expert on that. You could get somebody on life, disability, and or even health insurance as topics if you wanted to continue the series with people who have much more knowledge of that than I do. I'm flying at like 10,000 feet. Same with estate planning basics. But here's the reality based on a Gallup poll that was done in 2021. Only 46% of adults who responded to that survey said they had a will. My wife had a brother pass away. It just made 3 years last week. And he was unmarried, a successful professional. He had no children. He had no will, or at least none that we could find. And 3 years later, his estate isn't settled. And it's not an insignificant estate, but because he didn't have a will and a trust, we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to get the estate settled. And it's to me, it's amazing. It got slowed down because of COVID, and there are other kind of complexities to it. And it isn't nobody's suing each other. There's none of those sorts of controversies about that money's mine. No, it's mine. That's not what's going on. It's just this stuff becomes very complex and time consuming, and a court system that doesn't have adequate judges to take care of this. And so to me, it's shocking that it's 3 years later, and I'm hoping it'll get resolved before the fourth year. But you don't want to put your loved ones through that. If you have a will, it can get things speeded up much quicker. If you have trust, it can help. I would argue you've got beneficiary forms at your employer. Fill those out. If you leave them blank, state law determines what happens. The whole thing is a mess. So you do want to look at those things, and particularly as you get older, you might want to give somebody a power of attorney to do things for you. It could be a loved one you trust. You want healthcare directives. What do you want to happen under certain situations? And again, those beneficiary designations. So I'm not an expert on this, but I do really want to point out you want to have people look into this. You can look at this later, but I thought Warren Buffett puts out an annual Thanksgiving letter, and he talked about wills, and his suggestion is that all parents, your parents should go over their wills with their kids before they die, and make sure you talk to them individually and don't create kind of issues that you don't need to have. When controversies happen, you don't want your loved ones to be fighting each other, and just make your wishes known. So I'll leave this for you to read later when you get this report. So bring it all together, right? You create your own financial plan. You do all the things we were talking about in there. Again, I look at my plan probably twice a year. I make updates to it all you know, and tweaks and changes based on what I think is reasonable and appropriate. Because things change but I think you're more likely to meet your goals if you're willing to say, I'm willing to I am willing to put aside, you know, maybe 10 or 20 hours a year toward really thinking this through and saying this is just an activity that if I put some time toward it, I'm more likely to succeed. And those books like The Millionaire Next Door, all of the millionaires, they all spend more time than everybody else on average thinking about their money and their plans and things of that nature. That this doesn't happen automatically. You don't just automatically kind of successfully save and meet all these financial goals. You need to plan. Lastly, I'm going to really go through this quick. As you get more wealth, you know, when I worked at a big asset management concern, you know, that today has about 1.2 trillion in assets, we did a survey to Americans and we wanted to know, when do you need a financial advisor? We found out there were two kind of times when people go, I need to talk to somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. One is when they came close to retirement, say about age 50 to 55, all the way to 65. You know, they wanted to know, can I retire? I'm not sure I can, because they don't know how to do the calculations that I was showing you earlier to try to figure out how much you need to, you know, what's your number and how do I hit that number. The second group was individuals who suddenly had $1 million, and they've done a great job saving and building it. But for some reason, when it went from 6 digits to 7 digits, they suddenly were very concerned and said, "Oh my God, you know, this is problematic for me." So, so that's something to consider. And so you might need to see a financial advisor. Make sure it's a fiduciary. Not everyone who provides advice, like broker dealers, are technically fiduciaries. Some are, some are not. You want to know you have a fiduciary. And a fiduciary is someone under the law who it's their legal obligation to put you first. Not themselves, not to make money off of you, which they will, but they're supposed to do things in your best interest. That's what a fiduciary does. They have transparent fees. It's supposed to be unbiased advice. So some questions you might want to ask before you hire a financial advisor is, all right, you know, how long have they been doing this, right? What experience do you have? Are you new? Have you just been doing this for a year? Or have you been doing this for a decade? What are your qualifications? And then once they give you these little letters, go online and check them out. You can even search on different websites, and the Department of Financial Regulation in Vermont will help you do that. You can search to see whether or not anybody's, you know, made claims against them. I mean, do they have a bad reputation? You know, what services do you offer? Is it just money management? Are you going to give me financial planning advice? How do you approach financial planning? What's your investment philosophy, right? If you're a conservative investor, you might not want somebody who thinks you should have 90% in equities. Key question is, how do you get paid? How much am I paying you? Is there hidden fees in the products that you're not telling me? Could anyone other than you benefit from my recommendations? You know, is there somebody else you're helping who's going to take you out to get a steak dinner or send you tickets to a show? And again, you know, you want to make sure you understand their discipline history. Has anybody ever publicly disciplined you for unlawful or unethical actions in your professional career? That could be state regulatory agencies and federal agencies like FINRA, which regulates all broker dealers. And describe your typical client. Am I one? You know, or am I such a tiny client that I'm not going to get any attention? And do you have some referrals that you could give me? So those are things you might want to look to. Lastly, some resource tools. I gave you a list of some budget apps. You may find some that are better than that. There are plenty of great financial calculators on the websites. Two websites that have a lot of, you know, Investopedia and NerdWallet are two. I'm sure there are others like Bankrate. that have some great things. And there's a list of books here that I think for people who want some advice, they got some good advice in there about, how to, do this financial planning. So with that, I'll stop. I'm going to stop sharing. Brianna, do we have any questions?
Nothing that has come through the chat yet, but I welcome people to drop any in there.
If not, I guess we can let people go.
Is there, I know some people like will do like what might be now deemed as old school, but like using a spreadsheet for their budgeting. Do you think that's still a viable option? Or do you think you might as well just use the tools that are out there?
I mean, you can definitely do it if you don't want to spend the money to do it. You can try to look for some free budgeting apps, but I mean, there are some nice things with some of these apps. I think Quicken has one that they use to replace one of their products. The thing about some of these budgeting apps is you can actually integrate your other accounts from sort of and literally have the data automatically populated from your bank accounts and things of that nature. So the thing that's neat about some of the apps is how easy it is. You can download data from your credit card, you can download data from your savings and things of that nature. You might have to, physically put things in. You may be able to download things from your 401k, or your HSA provider if it's a third party. So there are things you can do. They're called aggregators, and they have some pretty good point-to-point cybersecurity and things of that nature. So, but that's something you can get that if you're doing. So the cash flow analysis, right? Where am I spending things on? Where's the income coming from? Those sorts of things and net worth calculations. A lot of that can be automated with data feeds. You can't do that with a spreadsheet. It's a little bit more paper bound and maybe a little bit more work, and that may be worth it. I mean, I personally don't use the apps. But I'm a troglodyte. I'm not a digital native like you are. So I can remember when faxing was a new thing. So and overnight packages. That was I remember sending my first email, and so for me, Excel's fine, but for younger people, I think the apps tend to be very beneficial. But I would do your research on them. The pricing tends to be, anywhere from like 5 to 15 or 20 a month, which may be too much for that and for what you need, but it's some find it very helpful and worthwhile. And they're also like tutorials and instructions. The thing that with a lot of these apps now, the better ones, is there's all sorts of education, online education, that's very specific to very specific topics that you can take advantage of.
We did just get a question come through on any suggestions on figuring out how much you need to live on per year after retirement.
Yeah, I mean, again, take a look at your income. So what's your pre-retirement income? So hypothetically, what most financial advisors would tell you is you want, say, 70% of your retirement income or more. Some might say as low as 65%, and some would say as high as 85. I don't think you have to go that high. But you would take your pre-retirement income, you would multiply it, say, by 70%. So hypothetically, I make 100,000 a year. You'd want 70,000 in retirement. Then you'd want to go to your Social Security site because you can find this information online. They'll give you an estimate of how much you can get at, and if you lose money if you take it early. So if you take it at 62, for example, my retirement age is full retirement. I think I may be 68. Or 67. I think I'm 67 or 68, one or the other. And but I have no intention of taking my Social Security to 70 because you get like another 8% added to your monthly payout. So a lot of financial planners will say if you can delay Social Security for a few years and live off your other savings. So, Social Security on average will take, as I said earlier, maybe give you 30, maybe 40% for average income as low as under 20. Rather as low as 25% or less for people with higher incomes, over the max of the Social Security benefit. And so you want to figure out what's left over after Social Security of that 80,000. And then you want to figure out if I could only took 4% out of my savings each year, that's going to tell you how much you need. And I think if you go online, there are places that could maybe calculators help you figure that out. You can easily do it with the calculator, but that's the way to do it. So I do have that example in the slides, but financial planners will tell you want 60 to 80% of your pre-retirement income in retirement.
Yeah. And I think also just reiterating that there's so many tools out there. I feel like if you Googled how much should I retire with, there'd be like retirement calculators popping up. But of course, you have to vet them and figure out what's correct, what's going to make sense for you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you can get financial planning at low cost. Vanguard, I think, will give you a financial advisor who I think can help you put you in the right direction. And they charge, I think it's as low as like 30 basis points. So there's 100 basis points at 1%. So that's less than a third of 1% a year of your portfolio to get some level of financial advice. So there's a variety of low cost financial advice providers out there, particularly at firms like Schwab and Fidelity. Those have some pretty good options.
Yeah. All right. I know we're a little bit over time, so I'm just gonna, please everyone, just encourage you to fill out that feedback form that you'll be getting. Just helps us optimize and improve these webinars. And if there's any more topics that you want to dive deeper into, whether that was retirement planning, estate planning, or anything else that was talked about, or other things that weren't touched on today, let us know. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much to John for doing this series with us. It's been great. Really,
Great.
really appreciate that.
Thank you all. Happy holiday season to everyone.